Ladies and gentlemen, Anna Quindlen! So it's the 70s. Jane Fonda's touring Vietnam because that's our ambassador, apparently. Pat Nixon is the first lady, which I think is interesting to think about who was first lady over time and what we thought of that person. That's a real lightning rod. Patty Hearst. There was a woman that was canonized.
Yeah, having spent some time in Berkeley, I believe Patty Hearst's entire story.
Yeah. Go back, you'll believe even more stories. And then that woman, Elizabeth Seton, who was canonized by the Roman Catholic Church as a saint. And you started a career in journalism. Tell us about the first days at work.
Well, it depends on where I'm working. I started when I was 18 as a copy girl at the New Brunswick Home News, and that was absolutely fantastic. It was right after I graduated from high school. And then during the year that I was off from college, I went back to work there as a city desk clerk. And I was, I guess, almost 20 then, 19, 20. And they let me do young people's stories. Mm-hmm. Well, in 1971, young people's stories were the stories. Right. So I wound up doing a lot of really great stuff and getting a lot of great clips. And when I went back to Barnard, I went through the box that they have for the Barnard babysitting service of people who need babysitters and pulled out the names of 2 discernible bylines and went to work for them as a babysitter.
Clever girl.
Yes, but I was an excellent babysitter, and all 4 of my babies are in the business, which I think
no
a
kidding.
lot. Yes, yes.
That's great.
And they helped me get one of the people involved helped me get a summer job at the New York Post, which was then a way left-leaning tabloid and the most fun place in the world to work. And
were you just all foaming at the mouth about democratic ideals and liberalism and free love and...
No, it was much more. I mean, don't forget this, right after I graduated in May of '74, Nixon resigned in August.
Yeah.
So Watergate was the story.
Right.
But, you know, a tabloid is a great place to start because it's really irreverent. You know, starting at the New York Times, I don't think is good for anyone because it really is the first rough draft of history. And when you're young, you need a place to make mistakes and have a good time. And that's what the Post was for me.
Now it's the internet. Now you can have a blog.
Exactly. And there were a lot of great women there, and they were hugely supportive and hugely helpful because, frankly, in my early newspaper jobs, I had no clue. I had no clue at all. And then when I was 24 years old, I was hired by the New York Times because they had had a class action suit brought against them by 6 really, really brave women who basically got nothing out of it except a future for other women. Mm-hmm. They charged that the paper didn't hire, promote, or pay women in parity with men. And they hired a whole bunch of women really quickly, and I was one of them. So much of my career at the New York Times grows directly out of that class action suit.
Oh, it's interesting. It's interesting because I think that what's in vogue right now is to say that the country's gotten too legalistic and that there are too many of these sorts of things and that it's too easy to bring action against a group. And here you are, you know, into this incredible career.
The other thing that you always want to say when you're on college campuses is it's really important. I was an affirmative action hire at the New York Times. And there is no shame to that unless once you get your foot in the door, you can't cut the mustard.
Right.
But there were a lot of us, and we cut the mustard big time. So the idea that affirmative action means hiring the second or third rate is preposterous on its face when you look at those of us who embody it.
Right. So did you have signed posters of Katharine Graham on your wall? I mean, was she your idol? She was the first person that I feel like I was aware of that was powerful and respected for her business acumen and her good sense rather than, being a movie star or a singer or even a novelist.
Yeah, but she's such a great example of what we're talking about here, Kelly, and it's why her memoir, Personal History, is one of 3 memoirs I chose my son is an editor at the Barnes & Noble Review, and he asked me to choose 3 memoirs by women.
And you didn't choose the middle place? Excuse me? This interview is over.
I think I've done a fair amount of tub thumping.
You have. You were so good to me. So good to me.
But you know, Kay Graham was a very quiet and insecure young woman whose father owned a newspaper. And when he decided that he had to find a successor to run the newspaper after he was no longer running it, he gave the newspaper to her husband. Phil Graham, and made him, that actually happened at the New York Times. Jean Sulzberger was an only child, and it was her husband who was given the job as chairman and publisher of the New York Times. And Phil Graham actually had significant mental illness. He had an affair with a young staffer, and you know, mortified and broke his wife's heart, and then one day on a day pass from a hospital, he killed himself. And Kay Graham couldn't figure out what else to do, and she took over the paper herself and became one of the greatest newspaper publishers in the history of the form. So it's such an instructive tale about a woman being told and telling herself, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't.
Right.
And one day saying, I must, and realizing I can. It's really, it's an incredibly affecting book.
Yeah, she's amazing.